pyramids from a non-human intelligence also has components in our today's reality. Probably the most famous example of this is Terence McKenna. Terence McKenna was an anthropologist who went into the Amazon rainforest. He partook of a potion called ayahuasca, which he said opened his mind, projected his mind into another dimension, and in that other dimension he made contact with non-human intelligences. He said that they gave him a piece of information which was the fabric of time, how time was constructed, and how the fabric of time really was a fractal wave. They gave him a mathematical formula, and he brought this mathematical formula with him from this other dimension into our present reality. And for approximately 30 years, he subjected this to analysis, gave it to people for various experimentations with them. They were made into computer programs. It was believed that novelty, new things, was somehow related to this concept of time. And he also believed that time at some point was going to run out. Now, Terence McKenna's example of time wave zero, or the time wave, or whatever you want to call it, this fractal wave, this mathematical equation, is really very good evidence of a non-human intelligence giving mankind information. And so we see that this is not just happening in the past, but also in the present. And so I think we have to distinguish as well when we are defining ancient aliens. When von Däniken posed the question in the 1960s, very much the question on everybody's mind was whether a physical ET came here and gave us information. And the story of Owanis is clearly an example of where this is likely the case. Duncan Lunan says that there are 3 to 4 of such potential contacts in the history of our civilization, but not more.
Non-human intelligence that appears to be operating or performing in the form of UFOs, so operating UFOs or using them as performance, that this apparently non-human intelligence does engage with humankind in a way that is, I don't know what you'd call it, but consciousness driven. So that is what's reported to me. I have never experienced that, so I don't know. But I would encourage anybody to try to explore the realms of consciousness in a safe way, in a legal way, all of that, and then report into us. Like, let us know. We need more psychonauts. We need more explorers of psychology and of consciousness. We do.
I like the term non-human intelligence in a sense, because again, there's a lot of assumptions in there that may cause us to go down the wrong roads. It could, these could be something that are weather phenomena of Earth, right? Or something else that is just something we don't understand and can't imagine right now that's still of this Earth. If we consider extraterrestrials or something that came from a physical place far away in space-time, that leads us to some detection assumptions that we would need to make. And so I just try to not categorize it under anything and just say, hey, is this demonstrating intelligence? And start from there as a single object. What can we learn about it kinematically, how it's performing? What does that mean for its energy source? What does that mean for the G-forces inside? And then step it out a level and say, okay, how are these interacting with our fighters, if they are? How are they interacting with the weather and their environment? How are they interacting with each other? So can we look at these and how they're interacting perhaps as a swarm, especially off the East Coast where this is happening all the time with multiple objects, right? And so we might be able to determine some things about their maybe, sensor capabilities or the areas of focus, if we can determine how they're working in conjunction with each other. But, seeing one little flash of an object doesn't provide that type of insight.
Never mind.
The non-human intelligence presence has been here for a long time. That Colonel Philip Corso said there are 57 different races, and that some accords were made to talk about their presence, whether it be Hollywood, movies, or whatever, including the ABC special, that if it isn't done soon, they will probably do it.
Extraterrestrials are not a national security issue. They're an educational and social issue for our society, and they may be a spiritual issue.
When I retired from the military, I went to work for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and I worked with them for 14 years. So I've got 42 years of government service behind me, and throughout all those years, I had the very highest security classification you could have, top secret. When I was in NATO in 1963 through 1967, I had cosmic top secret.
Texts were written by a non-human intelligence. And of course, religions throughout history claimed that their holy books were written by a non-human intelligence. This was never true before. This could become true very, very quickly, with far-reaching consequences. Now, on a more prosaic level, we might soon find ourselves conducting lengthy online discussions about abortion, or about climate change, or about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with entities that we think are fellow human beings, but are actually AI bots. Now, the catch is that it's utterly useless, it's pointless for us to waste our time trying to convince an AI bot to change its political views, but the longer we spend talking with the bot, the better it gets to know us and understand how to hone its messages in order to shift our political views or our economic views or anything else. Through its mastery of language, AI, as I said, could also form intimate relationships with people and use the power of intimacy.
Or some sort of non-human intelligence communicating with me. So I have a bias, but I would be perfectly happy to be proven 100% wrong that any of this stuff is UAP or what have you. Except, again, I can't dismiss the testimonies of hundreds of individuals. And at some point, you have to give weight to that, in my mind.
What are some of the experiences? There's going to be more and more non-human intelligence. Eventually, there's going to be a point where we represent the minority of intelligence, maybe even a very minuscule amount. That's fine though, we can just turn it off, right? It's a thought, but think. When modern-day humans began to take over the planet, why didn't the chimps and Neanderthals turn us off? If this artificial intelligence becomes super intelligent and learns through and is connected to the internet, well, we can't just shut down the entire internet, there's no off switch. So what happens if we end up stuck with AI that is constantly and exponentially getting smarter than we are? What if it gets to a point that us humans get in the way, and the AI hits the off switch on humanity?
By non-human intelligence, as you were saying, nothing of that importance has ever happened, I think, in the history of humanity, and we're not prepared for it. The issue of whether those robots or AIs will or will not have emotions, they will be programmed to have objectives. And the issue of how to program AIs to have objectives that are compatible with human interests is an extremely interesting issue.
Of discovering non-human intelligence, and he would see it through, even if it meant doing so on his own. Although Lilly entertained the idea that Echo was merely a manifestation of what he unconsciously wanted for himself, and that nothing supernatural was occurring.
Never mind.
That life or non-human intelligence exists out there. In particular, astronomers looking at our galaxy attempted to predict how many possible sophisticated civilizations might have and are still existing in our Milky Way. The famous Drake equation set forth by astrophysicist Frank Drake, the father of SETI science, predicted around 8,000 such civilizations should exist.
The non-human
Of whatever the non-human intelligence might be versus us, that if it doesn't necessarily care about us, then
how do we reconcile that with other kinds of observations where it's running around looking at our nuclear facilities, or in other situations such as the Zimbabwe Ariel case, it's telling us that, oh, we're poisoning our planet. How do you reconcile these? We care about the ecosystem, but we don't care about whether we hurt you in the process of our doing whatever it is that we're doing. And I think that tells you something even deeper, that, and I had this conversation with Jacques Vallée once, is it one thing or is it many things? And Jacques' answer to me was typically Valléan, which was, well, it could be one thing pretending to be many things.
Conversation with a non-human
of whatever the non-human intelligence.
With a non-human intelligence, either inorganic or extraterrestrial.
Men are all alike.
In what way?
They're always bugging us about something or other.
Can you think of a specific example?
In 1965, engineers at MIT booted up ELIZA, a natural language processing program that simulated a conversation with a sympathetic therapist. ELIZA wasn't run on a neural network, she was just a program that searched for key words in a user's input and then spat out leading questions.
You're like my father in some ways. You don't argue with me.
Why do you think I don't argue with you?
You're afraid of me.
Does it please you to think I'm afraid of you?
My father's afraid of everybody. My father's afraid of everybody.
She was a parlor trick, a kind of digital seance with added therapy buzzwords. But for those early AI true believers, she was a thrilling simulation.
Developed by non-human intelligence, and that somehow or another we have acquired possession of that technology.
Inman does not say much. There is no reference, there's no mention of UFOs, spacecraft, anything like that. The conversation centers on recovered vehicles, technology, and so forth. But Admiral Inman was aware of the subject matter, and we know from his executive assistant, Tom King, that there was to be no public discussion of these matters, the matters that had been discussed between Exler and Inman, because of national secrecy laws.
If we're dealing with non-human intelligence,
that presumably somehow, perhaps not physically, but perhaps physically, can cross from star to star, then we are dealing with something vastly more sophisticated than ourselves. That's just given at the get-go. Well, if it's vastly more advanced than we are, then DNA sequencing, complete understanding of the molecular genesis of thought, so forth and so on, would be no problem for that level of technical sophistication. You would also like to think that ethics and good taste would keep pace with this evolutionary process. So to my mind, the idea of fleets of alien spacecraft filling the skies of Earth, that's as unsubtle as kicking down somebody's front door with an M1 tank to announce, "We're here." I don't think you would do it that way. If you really wanted to study a aboriginal race, and you really had a hot technology, what you would do is you would study their social psychology, and you would say, are there any chinks in the armor of their expectations about how reality behaves?
a non-human intelligence, allegedly from some other source in the universe, that would manipulate DNA in already evolving primates on this planet in Africa to create Homo sapien that did not exist before they manipulated DNA. Technically, the first answer is, today, if we did that, we would call them androids. We would be the makers. We would be the DNA manipulators. The product of that DNA manipulation would be our creation. We would call it an android. An android is a biological robot. A robot is a mechanical, made out of metal.
Clearly, a non-human intelligence, vastly superior technology,
yes,
interfering with the most powerful weapons at our disposal.
That's what I'm describing. Yes.
You think it was alien?
I think it was off Earth, yes, or alien.
I think of non-human intelligence.
Guys.
Realm of non-human intelligence.
Of non-human intelligence or an intelligence that we just haven't discovered yet. So this is absolutely on the table. And it's not just me saying it. This is your government saying it.
Yeah, they're trying to figure this out. They put together, NASA's now put together
non-human intelligence, which is ironic because IQ is one of the few human qualities that we actually can reliably quantify.
Interact with non-human intelligence in ways that they perceive. And we're beginning to do a little bit of that with whales and with dolphins and with a number of other species. We can actually understand that prairie dogs standing up in the field are saying to one another, hey, there's the big guy over there in the yellow sweater, he's back. Other intelligence is going to have to speak to us in our language if we're going to have any ability to communicate. At G.D. Bassett, thought experiment. And interact with.
Spark a dialogue about
believes that non-human intelligence is the key to cracking AI development.